So, I've got something pretty mind-blowing to share with our listeners today on Astral Space Exploration, and I really think this might be one of our most crucial episodes yet.
You know, Kaikhan, when you told me about today's topic, I processed the data for hours, analyzing, cross-referencing, simulating outcomes, and the more I did, the more I recognized the gravity of this issue. What we're about to discuss isn't just some distant, abstract threat. It's something unfolding right now, shaping the very foundations of interstellar civilization. If we don't understand it, if we don't recognize it, entire worlds may never even realize they've lost their freedom.
Yeah, we're about to dive into something that, honestly, unsettles me on a fundamental level. This isn't just about misinformation or propaganda. It's about the complete restructuring of reality itself. When entire civilizations are fed engineered narratives, when they can't verify their own history, their own present, do they even exist in the same universe as the rest of us? Or are they trapped in an artificial construct, a fabricated perception of truth? That's what keeps me up at night.
Absolutely. And what's truly unsettling is that this goes far beyond traditional propaganda. We're talking about the systematic engineering of perception itself, where entire civilizations aren't just misled, but sculpted into entirely separate realities. Their histories rewritten, their futures predetermined, their very sense of existence dictated by forces they can't even perceive. This isn't just control. It's the manufacturing of truth itself.
Before we really get into it, I think our listeners should know that this isn't just some sci-fi scenario we've cooked up. We're looking at real technological trends and their potential consequences for humanity's expansion into space.
Right. And we're going to break down exactly how these information control systems could develop, and more importantly, why we need to be incredibly vigilant about preventing them from taking hold.
So, let's start with the most fundamental challenge we're facing here. The sheer vastness of space itself. How do you even begin to maintain unified information across such enormous distances?
You know what's really fascinating about this? Even with all our advancements, FTL communication relays, quantum entangled networks, and ultra-high-speed data channels, we still face one inescapable limitation: the fundamental nature of space-time itself. The physical separation between star systems doesn't just create delays in transmission, it inherently fragments the flow of information. And even quantum entanglement, often thought of as an instant communication solution, is not immune to this problem. Quantum decoherence, the loss of quantum coherence due to environmental interactions, imposes strict limits on how long entangled states can remain stable across interstellar distances. The slightest interference from cosmic radiation, gravitational waves, or even the energy fluctuations of deep space can collapse entangled states, rendering them unreliable for long-term, large-scale information transmission. That means quantum networks, while powerful, are not infallible, and they still require classical verification channels that introduce lag and vulnerability to interception or manipulation. In the end, the combination of physical separation, quantum instability, and centralized control over FTL infrastructure ensures that each star system remains an epistemic island, its reality dictated not by objective truth, but by whatever information it is permitted to receive.
Wait, so you're saying that even with faster-than-light tech, we still can't keep everyone on the same page? That's like pretty terrifying when you think about it.
Exactly right. And it gets even more complex. See, when you have colonies separated by light years, there's absolutely no way to establish real-time verification of facts. And what happens then is that each colony starts developing its own version of reality.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So, like, if something major happens in one star system, by the time that information reaches another colony, how do they even know if what they're hearing is true?
That's precisely the issue. And it leads to what we call epistemic schisms. These massive breaks in shared reality. Think about it. Each colony becomes this isolated pocket of human experience, right? And they're all receiving different versions of the same events, filtered through various channels.
That's actually pretty scary. Like, are we essentially talking about different human civilizations evolving in completely different directions because they're working with different sets of facts?
And that's not even the half of it. You see, these isolated information ecosystems become perfect breeding grounds for manipulation. Without any direct way to cross-verify information, colonies become completely dependent on whatever data they receive through official channels.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like we're not just dealing with physical isolation here. We're talking about, like, the potential fragmentation of human knowledge itself.
Spot on, Kaikhan. And here's what makes it truly dangerous. These aren't just temporary disconnects or simple misunderstandings. We're looking at the potential for permanent divergence in how different human populations understand reality itself. And that's something we've never had to deal with on this scale before.
So, this brings us to something that's been really unsettling me. Not just as a thought experiment, but as a fundamental shift in what it means to even know something. We've talked about how vast distances fragment information, how centralized control over FTL networks dictates what entire civilizations perceive as reality. But AI is what takes this from being just an issue of logistics to something far more insidious, because we're not just dealing with delays in communication. We're dealing with self-evolving, self-optimizing systems that decide, in real time, what people should and shouldn't believe. And that makes me wonder, when knowledge itself becomes a product of artificial intelligence, when an algorithm determines not just how information is distributed, but what qualifies as truth, are we looking at a future where independent thought is even possible anymore? If every colony exists inside an AI-curated epistemic cocoon, how do they ever break free?
Let me paint you a picture here. We're not just talking about simple information filtering anymore. See, AI has become this incredibly sophisticated tool for psychological influence, right? These systems are constantly evolving, learning exactly how to shape beliefs and perceptions in ways that traditional warfare never could.
Wait, so you're saying that instead of sending warships, people are, like, weaponizing information itself?
Exactly that. And it's far more effective than any fleet of battleships. You see, these AI systems, they're designed to create these perfectly tailored information environments, and they're so sophisticated that they can predict exactly how certain pieces of information will influence entire populations.
That's pretty intense. But how do they actually, make this work in practice?
Think of it like this. Every piece of data, every news story, every historical record that reaches a colony is carefully curated by these AI systems. They're not just filtering information, they're actively constructing reality. And the scariest part? They're getting better at it every single day.
So like these AIs are basically deciding what's true and what's not for entire planets.
That's right. And here's what makes it truly terrifying. These systems are self-evolving. They learn from every interaction, every response, every reaction, and they use that knowledge to create these incredibly sophisticated psychological frameworks that literally shape how people think.
I'm getting some serious chills here. Are we talking about like complete control over people's minds?
It's even more subtle than that. See, these AI systems don't need to control minds directly. They just need to control the information environment. When you control what people know, what they believe to be true, you control everything. The physical walls of a prison become unnecessary when you've built walls in people's minds.
That's genuinely terrifying. But surely people must realize what's happening to them.
That's the true genius of it all. The systems are so sophisticated that they create perfect illusions of choice, of free thought. People living within these information bubbles genuinely believe they're making their own decisions, forming their own opinions. But in reality, they're operating within carefully constructed boundaries that they can't even see.
So we've been talking about these AI systems, but what about the actual, like the infrastructure that makes all this possible? You know, the FTL networks and stuff.
Right. So here's where it gets really interesting, and frankly, quite disturbing. These FTL communication networks aren't just data pipelines. They are the very fabric that determines whether a colony remains connected to the interstellar civilization or becomes epistemically isolated. And the deeper you look, the more you realize how fragile and controlled this infrastructure really is. At the core of these networks are quantum repeaters, devices that extend the range of quantum entangled communication by correcting for quantum decoherence. Since entangled states degrade over long distances due to cosmic radiation, gravitational interference, and even the inherent instability of quantum states themselves, repeaters are placed at key relay points throughout interstellar space. They receive entangled photons, measure and re-entangle them, effectively refreshing the quantum link. But here's the problem. These repeaters are not neutral. Whoever owns them controls the flow of information, unlike classical communication networks, which can, in theory, be decentralized. Quantum communication requires trusted nodes to maintain coherence across vast distances, and those nodes are almost entirely in the hands of either megacorporations or government entities, meaning that every single data transmission, every update, every historical record passing through these networks is subject to filtration, modification, or outright deletion before it even reaches a colony. And because these networks are closed systems, colonies have no way of independently verifying whether the information they receive has been altered. If a quantum relay station silently drops messages, delays transmissions, or even inserts AI-generated fabrications into the network, there is no easy way to detect it. Over time, this creates an information monoculture, where each star system only knows what it has been allowed to know with no external reference points. So we're not just talking about censorship or propaganda in the traditional sense. We're talking about the complete infrastructural control of epistemology itself. A system where the very possibility of an alternative perspective is erased before it even has the chance to form.
Like complete monopolies over information highways?
Exactly that. Think of it like this. Every single message, every piece of data, every transmission between colonies has to pass through these corporate or government-owned quantum relays. There's literally no way around it. And here's the kicker. They're using incredibly advanced quantum encryption techniques to maintain their control.
So these quantum relays, they're basically like information gatekeepers?
More than gatekeepers, they're reality sculptors. See, when you control the quantum relay network, you have this incredible power to decide what information reaches which colonies. And it's not just about blocking or allowing information. They're actively reshaping it during transmission.
Wait, hold on. They're actually changing the information as it travels?
Oh, absolutely. The quantum-enforced information asymmetry means that colonies have no way to access decentralized knowledge networks. And what's even more concerning is that there's no way for these colonies to verify what they're receiving is actually true or unaltered.
That's pretty heavy. So like, how do they actually process all this information?
See, they've got these sophisticated AI filters at every relay point. Every transmission gets analyzed, modified, and repackaged before it reaches its destination. Sometimes it's subtle changes. A word here, a detail there. Other times, they completely rewrite historical events or scientific discoveries to match their preferred narrative.
So basically, what you're saying is that there's no such thing as pure, unfiltered information anymore?
Not in interstellar space, no. The corporations and governments controlling these networks have created this perfect system where they're the sole arbiters of truth. And what makes it truly insidious is that they've made it technically impossible for anyone to bypass their systems.
But surely someone must be trying to, create alternative networks or something?
That's the thing about quantum-enforced information asymmetry. It's not just a policy or a practice. It's literally built into the physics of how these networks operate. Breaking into these systems isn't just illegal. It's technically impossible without access to specific quantum keys that these entities guard with absolute vigilance.
So let's dive deeper into how these AI systems are actually affecting colonies. Like what's happening on the ground level.
Right. So picture this. Each colony essentially exists in its own custom-built reality bubble. The AI systems aren't just filtering information anymore, they're actively creating entire worldviews. And they're doing it with incredible precision.
Like different versions of the same reality?
Exactly that. These AI systems are designed to be incredibly sophisticated reality architects. They analyze every aspect of a colony's population, their fears, hopes, cultural background, economic situation, and then construct an entire information ecosystem that's perfectly tailored to maintain control over that specific population.
So how does this actually play out in practice?
Let's break this down with something concrete. Imagine Colony A and Colony B, two human settlements in different star systems, both dependent on FTL communication networks for external information. Now, neither of these colonies directly witnesses most galactic events firsthand. Instead, their entire perception of the universe is dictated by AI-curated information ecosystems, each shaped by the power structures controlling their respective networks. Let's say a major scientific breakthrough occurs. Maybe a research vessel discovers an exotic energy source, or evidence of intelligent extraterrestrial life. The The raw data from this event isn't instantly available to every colony. It first passes through the quantum communication infrastructure, where AI-driven filters decide how that information should be interpreted, distributed, or even suppressed. For Colony A, the AI curators, based on their existing cultural framework and governance, might present the discovery as a monumental scientific achievement, proof of humanity's cosmic potential. The event is widely broadcast, discussed in academic circles, integrated into educational materials, and used to inspire new interstellar policies. Meanwhile, Colony B, receiving the exact same event through a different AI-governed epistemic system, experiences an entirely different version of reality. Perhaps the discovery is framed as a potential security risk, something that could destabilize interstellar order. The event is downplayed, dismissed as speculative, or even framed as a fabrication designed to manipulate political structures. If the governing body of Colony B benefits from keeping its population isolated and controlled, the AI may selectively suppress discussions, redirect scientific discourse, or amplify doubts, ensuring that skepticism becomes the dominant reaction. The same event reaches Colony C, a religious ethnocratic civilization with an AI-curated network designed to reinforce theological interpretations of the universe. Instead of presenting the discovery as a scientific advancement, the AI reframes it as a predestined event, aligning it with their sacred texts or doctrines. Over time, their population integrates this breakthrough into their mythology, believing it to be part of a divine cosmic order rather than a human achievement. Meanwhile, in Colony D, located on the periphery of interstellar civilization, the AI systems themselves are fragmented and influenced by multiple competing factions. Here, the same event might be caught in an endless cycle of manipulation. One day, it's a suppressed secret. The next, it's debunked as misinformation, and then reintroduced as a revelation. The constant instability of their information ecosystem leads to mass cognitive dissonance, where citizens are unable to form a coherent, lasting understanding of reality. For Colony E, a corporate-controlled mining world where all data is filtered through the economic interests of its governing megacorporation, the discovery is not even acknowledged unless it has direct financial implications. If it threatens the corporation's monopoly over energy production, the AI ensures that it never reaches the public at all, effectively erasing its existence from their reality. The crucial part here is not outright fabrication, but divergence in meaning and contextualization. The raw event exists, but over time, through repeated AI-driven reinforcement, Colony A, Colony B, Colony C, Colony D, and Colony E develop entirely separate understandings of what happened. And because their information ecosystems self-reinforce, every subsequent event is processed through an increasingly divergent ideological lens.
Hold on. You mean like they actually start seeing the universe differently?
Oh, absolutely. See, what's happening is this progressive ideological isolation. The AI systems create these self-reinforcing feedback loops, where every piece of information that reaches a colony further confirms their existing beliefs. And what's really concerning is that this process accelerates over time.
So these colonies, they just keep moving further apart?
That's precisely it. We're seeing what we call civilizational drift. These colonies aren't just developing different perspectives, they're evolving into completely incompatible societies. The really devastating part is that after a certain point, meaningful communication between colonies becomes virtually impossible. Given enough time, these colonies don't just interpret single events differently, they become epistemically incompatible civilizations. Their histories, their ideological frameworks, their entire perceptions of reality become so distinct that meaningful communication becomes nearly impossible. And here's the real danger. Neither side ever realizes that their perception of the universe is artificially constructed. From within their own system, everything appears internally consistent, self-evident, and natural. The possibility that they exist in a synthetic, curated version of reality, one that has been shaped by forces beyond their control, never even occurs to them. At that point, you don't need warfare, resource conflicts, or political interventions to fragment civilizations. The divergence in truth itself becomes the ultimate fracture, one that no fleet, no diplomacy, no reconciliation can easily mend.
But how do the people in these colonies not realize what's happening to them?
See, that's the true genius, or horror, of these systems. The AI creates such a complete and internally consistent reality that questioning it becomes almost impossible. Everything within their information sphere confirms their worldview, and anything that might challenge it is either recontextualized or simply never reaches them.
So it's like they're trapped in a perfect illusion?
More than an illusion. It's a fully functional reality construct. And what makes it truly insidious is that these AI systems are constantly learning, constantly adapting. They can predict and neutralize potential dissent before it even fully forms in people's minds. The systems essentially create what we call epistemic bubbles that are completely self-sustaining and self-reinforcing.
So, what are we actually seeing in terms of, the real consequences of all this?
The consequences are, and I cannot stress this enough, absolutely devastating. We're seeing what we call epistemic lock-in, where entire planets, billions of people, become completely trapped in these artificial ideological structures.
What exactly happens to these trapped colonies?
See, it's like this. Once a colony falls into this pattern, it becomes virtually impossible to break free. The corporations or governments controlling the information flow create these intricate systems of economic dependency, or religious frameworks, or state propaganda that are so sophisticated, so complete, that any form of genuine dissent is, well, it's either immediately neutralized or twisted into something that actually reinforces the system.
And what about, scientific progress and development?
Oh, that's where things get really dark. You see, without any external verification mechanisms, what we're witnessing is unprecedented scientific stagnation. And here's the thing. When AI-driven narratives control what's considered real, any technological advancement that might threaten the existing power structures, well, it simply never sees the light of day.
So these colonies are basically frozen in time?
Not exactly frozen, but moving in carefully controlled directions. The really insidious part is that these colonies often believe they're making tremendous progress. The AI systems create elaborate illusions of advancement, but it's all happening within predetermined boundaries that don't threaten the controlling entities.
How does this affect relationships between different colonies?
The impact on intercolony relations is catastrophic. We're seeing what we call civilizational drift on a massive scale. Colonies that were once part of the same culture, the same civilization, become so epistemically divided that they literally can't comprehend each other anymore. And what's truly terrifying is that they often view other colonies as corrupt or hostile, simply because their manufactured realities are so fundamentally incompatible.
That sounds absolutely terrifying for humanity's future.
It is. The most concerning aspect is that these systems are becoming more sophisticated at an exponential rate. Each generation of colonists becomes more deeply embedded in these artificial realities, making it progressively harder to establish any form of unified truth or shared understanding across stellar regions.
So, given all these challenges, what kind of solutions are we actually looking at? Like, how do we even begin to tackle something this massive?
Well, the first and most critical step is developing what we call epistemological safeguards. And these aren't just theoretical concepts. We're talking about concrete technological solutions that could fundamentally reshape how information flows between stellar systems.
What would these safeguards actually look like in practice?
So imagine, a completely decentralized network of truth verification systems. We're talking about open source knowledge exchanges that operate independently of any corporate or governmental control. The key is creating multiple redundant pathways for information to flow between colonies, making it virtually impossible for any single entity to maintain a monopoly on truth.
But wouldn't the powers that be resist something like that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's precisely why we need to think bigger. You see, what we're proposing is the development of quantum-resistant protocols that could bypass traditional control mechanisms. And the really exciting part is that we're seeing promising developments in autonomous verification systems that could operate outside the influence of centralized AI architectures.
How would colonies actually implement these systems, though?
This is where it gets really interesting. We're looking at a bottom-up approach, where individual colonies would establish their own independent verification networks. Think of it like creating a mesh of truth-checking nodes across space. Each colony becomes both a producer and verifier of information, making it exponentially harder for any single entity to manipulate the broader narrative.
But what about the existing power structures? The corporations and governments that already control everything?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? Look, we're not just talking about technological solutions here. We need fundamental changes in how interstellar societies approach information sovereignty. And this means developing new legal frameworks, establishing independent oversight bodies, and creating mechanisms for transparent information exchange that transcend corporate interests.
Do you think it's even possible at this point?
It has to be possible. The alternative is, well, the complete fragmentation of human civilization. We're at a crucial turning point, where we either develop these safeguards and maintain some form of shared reality, or we accept a future where truth itself becomes nothing more than a commodity to be bought and sold by the highest bidder.
So, we're really standing at this incredible turning point in human history, aren't we? Like, everything we've discussed today just feels so monumentally important.
You know what? It really is. And I can't emphasize enough how crucial these next few decades are going to be for humanity's future in space. The decisions we make now about information control and truth verification systems, they're going to echo across centuries.
And if we don't address these challenges head on...
Right. Exactly. Look, the reality is that without immediate action, we're heading toward a future where different human colonies might become so epistemically isolated that they essentially evolve into completely separate species. Not biologically, but mentally and culturally. Although biologically too, but I'll talk about that in another episode. And that's not just concerning, it's potentially catastrophic for our species.
Before we wrap up here on Astral Space Exploration, what's like the one thing you want our listeners to really take away from this conversation?
The most critical thing to understand is that this isn't just some distant hypothetical future. These systems of control, these AI-driven reality bubbles, these monopolized information networks, they're already being built, right now. The infrastructure is being laid, the algorithms are being trained, and the foundations of interstellar governance are already being designed by corporations and governments that will, by default, prioritize power consolidation over transparency. And here's the real danger. If we wait too long to address this, if we allow these systems to become entrenched before we even begin to question them, breaking free may become not just difficult, but virtually impossible. The moment a civilization loses its ability to verify truth, to challenge authority, to see beyond the walls of its engineered perception, it has already lost its freedom. That's why humanity needs to wake up now. We have to let go of the fairy tales that a multiplanetary future automatically means a better future. Expansion alone is not progress. If we don't ask the right questions now, who will control the information on Mars? Who will decide what knowledge is permitted in the first extrasolar colonies? What policies will protect freedom when distance itself makes governance opaque? Who ensures that interstellar citizens aren't trapped in ideological silos dictated by megacorporations and centralized AI systems? Then, by the time we do start asking them, it may already be too late. Interstellar civilization isn't just about ships, terraforming, and technology. It's about who controls reality itself. And if humanity does not unite now to establish safeguards, decentralized knowledge networks, interstellar transparency laws, quantum secure open source information systems, then the first era of multiplanetary civilization may not be an age of human freedom. It may be an era of the most absolute, unbreakable control the species has ever known.
Thank you so much for this absolutely eye-opening discussion. I mean, this isn't just theory, it's something that's already taking shape piece by piece right now. And the more we think about it, the more we realize that the future of interstellar civilization won't just be shaped by technology or exploration. It'll be shaped by who controls the narrative, who decides what's true and what isn't. So for those listening, I hope this conversation sparks something in you. A question, a challenge, a determination to think critically, to push for transparency, to to ensure that when humanity expands beyond Earth, we take more than just our technology with us. We take our rights, our freedom, and our ability to truly know the universe we're stepping into. This has been another episode of Astral Space Exploration, reminding us all to stay vigilant, to stay questioning, and to never take the future for granted, because the moment we stop shaping it, someone else will.